The Polo GTI behind me makes less horsepower come midsummer, and right now in midwinter it's making the most it possibly can. But the strange thing is, this M240i makes about the same horsepower all year round. So why is this the case? Why does a Polo GTI lose horsepower in the summer months? Well, the answer is actually really simple, and you guys are going to be able to walk away with the answer once this video is finished. Let me explain it to you. Oh, I always forget this car doesn't have gas struts. That's better, the traditional way. Now right down there is a big turbo, an upgraded one, a lot bigger than this VW Polo comes with from factory. And that's really good, because if you want to make horsepower, you've got to have more boost, and a bigger turbo does just that. But it's all well and good chasing boost and having a turbo that can make a lot of it, but that boost is literally no good if your air intake temperatures are too high. And today I'm going to show you exactly why intake air temperatures matter more than what boost your car makes. Now this part is going to annoy some people because boost doesn't exactly make power. And to be honest, they never really have. If you thought that your car feels fast on the first pull, and then the second and the third and the fourth, the car just feels slow. That's why. Now if you're watching this video, you probably know what a turbo's job is. A turbocharged car produces boost. And this part here, this is basically what does it. This is a B58 turbo that is very, very broken. But boost pressure is just boost pressure. It doesn't tell you anything about how much oxygen is actually getting into the engine. Take this Polo GTI for example. We could have two of the exact same cars. They could be identical and they could both make 20 psi with the same turbo. But one of them can make more power and the other one can make a lot less. And that is purely down to air temperature and density. And it's very simple to understand once you actually understand it. Hot air is less dense than cold air. So in reality, you want as much cold air going into the combustion chamber as possible. Think of it in simple terms. Hot air equals mild horsepower. Cold air equals a lot more horsepower. Now this weird looking thing here is the car's ECU. This is the brain of the car. And like I said, the ECU controls the car. It controls everything. It's effectively the car's brain. And that ECU monitors and looks at air temperatures a lot. And it cares about them a lot. And this thing, it's plugged into loads of sensors that monitor everything on the engine. And if those sensors are sensing that the engine is taking in a lot of warm air or hot air, then that ECU is going to pull timing. We'll discuss that a little bit further in the video. But what that basically means is the car's going to make a lot less horsepower. And this might seem strange for one reason, because if you have a boost gauge in the car can still be showing 20 psi of boost. But in reality, if that car is taking in hot air with that 20 psi of boost, the horsepower is not going to be the same. So for these first couple of minutes, we're going to talk about the Polo GTI because that uses an air-to-air intercooler. And once we finish talking about the Polo GTI, I'm going to pull the M240i round because that uses a completely different setup compared to this car. So for anybody who hasn't been following the channel for a while, this Polo GTI isn't stock. It's stage 3. So of course we've had to upgrade the intercooler. Now a very, very simple explanation is a big turbo which has been upgraded, produces more boost, that goes down through a line of pipes, and then we've got this big voodoo stage 3 intercooler on the front, and then that goes straight back up, and then that cold air goes into the engine. And because the car has been so heavily upgraded, the stock intercooler had to go because it wasn't doing a good enough job. And if you've ever wanted to modify a turbocharged car to produce more horsepower, somebody would have probably told you to upgrade the intercooler. And the reason you upgrade the intercooler is you go for a bigger one, so it can either be thicker, usually a bit bigger. It's better in all ways. It's got more surface area, so obviously when you're driving, there's more cold air hitting the surfaces of it, which then cool the air that the turbo is producing better. And as a rule of thumb, lower intake air temperatures means more consistent power because there's less ignition timing pulls that the ECU has to fix. Let's use an example here. If I upgraded this car with an upgraded turbo and all the rest of the stuff, but I still kept the stock intercooler, I could probably do one pull and have a lot of horsepower out of it, but then come the second, third and fourth pull, the car is going to feel awful. It's going to feel so slow because that intercooler isn't cooling down that boosted air correctly. I'm basically on the floor for this one, but this stage 3 intercooler keeps those pulls the same throughout the first, the second, the third and the fourth pull. It keeps it consistent. Talking very quickly about heat soak is important because you will probably hear this term when you're modifying a car, or if you're tuning the car. Heat soak is a common term that people use. And heat soak simply is basically when the intercooler absorbs more heat than the airflow can actually remove. And right now in the UK, it's pretty cold outside. It's about 3 degrees Celsius. So heat soaking is pretty rare because the air temperature is so cold. But come the summer months when we're reaching maybe the 20s, mid 20 degrees, if that happens, because the UK seems to be always cold at the moment. But in reality, it does sometimes happen, and summer heat soaking is quite common to happen. This little bit we're going to talk about is a little bit controversial because some people can say, yeah, but my boost is still reaching the same. So if the car is mapped for 20 psi, let's use that as a baseline throughout this video. Some people will say, yeah, but my boost gauge is still reading 20 psi, so the car is still making the horsepower that it's claimed to be making. And this in itself isn't exactly true, because the ECU can be reading 20 psi of boost, but in reality the car is making a lot less horsepower and you just don't realise it. Air-to-air intercoolers like this Voodoo Stage 3 one are great, and they're reliable and they're easy to work on, and they do exactly what they say on the tin. If you get a decent brand of air-to-air intercooler, it's going to do the job. It's going to cool that air down better. Let's say, for example, I'm sat in this seat, I'm driving around town and I'm doing 5 miles an hour and it's midsummer. Those intake air temperatures are going to skyrocket, and I've seen them on this car go north of 40 degrees Celsius. And if I were to then do a pull with those air intake temperatures being at 40 degrees Celsius, the car's going to feel mega slow. But then to finish off this example, say I drive carefully on the motorway for 10 minutes and it's cold outside, and I let those air intake temps drop down to maybe 10 degrees Celsius, the car is going to feel rapid again. Now it's time to talk about the BMW, because the M240i is a completely different situation. On the B58, but also a lot of other BMW engines, BMW invented something called charge cooling. And this is why you'll see on the B58, for example, you've got another coolant tank. This is your main coolant tank, and this is for your charge cooling system. And before everybody freaks out, I haven't got a coolant leak on the B58. I spilt coolant on the cap and I haven't cleaned it up yet. Now how this works simply is your boosted and compressed air passes through a heat exchanger, which is cooled by coolant, not airflow. This in itself is a very powerful tool because you have a lot less intake piping. For example, this is the charge pipe. It goes straight from the turbo straight into the intake manifold. It doesn't go from the turbo all the way down into an intercooler and then all the way back up into the intake manifold. So let's quickly recap on how this charge cooling system works on the B58, and also why it's just so completely overpowered when it comes to making horsepower. You see, coolant in itself has a much higher thermal mass than air does, which means it can resist temperature spikes a lot better. So let's take, for example, this B58 in this M240i being on track, where you'd be going flat out for maybe short segments, then long segments, then short, corners, etc. So this charge cooling system keeps those air intake temperatures a lot more stable across the board. We're using the B58 as an example here, but the M3s and the M4s with the S55 engine also benefit from this charge cooling system, as well as a load of other BMW engines. And this is why the B58 can feel so strong after doing pull after pull after pull, because it very rarely heat soaks itself. But like with anything in life, it's never just straight up positives, and the charge cooling system does have its limitations. One of those problems are, once that coolant heats up, it takes longer for it to actually cool back down. So very aggressive driving, maybe lap after lap after lap on track, you can overwhelm this system at some point, and that is why you can get a bigger heat exchanger to upgrade on this car, for example. And if you're like me and you tune the car and you have MHD, then you could do a sport mode setting for the intercooler, which basically turns that charge cooling system on steroids and helps it keep those intake air temperatures down even more. But a quick downside to this is, if you have a problem, it's obviously going to be a little bit more expensive than the air-to-air intercooler system that the Polo utilises. And that's just one of the downsides to this charge cooling system, that if it does break, you're more than likely going to have to spend more fixing it than you would have done on an air-to-air cooling system. All of this talking on cooling the air on both of these cars might have led you to one question. What system is better, the Polo's air-to-air system or the B58's charge cooling system? And the truth is, neither system is better universally. They both have their pros and their cons. The pros of the air-to-air are the fact that it's cheaper, you can get parts for it cheaper, but one of the limitations are that if you're driving around town, even with an upgraded intercooler, it's still very possible for that car to heat soak. So the Polo, it does its job, and it does its job well. And then we can look at the B58, for example. It's very, very good at keeping those air intake temperatures down, and you can give this car a very hard time with it being on the throttle and off the throttle. It's very consistent, but then if something goes wrong, it's obviously a lot more to replace than your standard air-to-air system that the Polo GTI utilises. I think the metric we can take away from this isn't peak power, but it's repeatable power that these cars can produce. And that statement leads us into a different question. How many pulls can either of these cars do before one of them starts to feel flat and slower? And this is why if you're tuning a car and then you're adding more and more boost and the car just feels flat, it's probably not down to that. It's probably because you're not managing the heat correctly. And if you're like me and you like tuning your cars, whether that be the Polo or the BMW, then do some data logging, do some runs, monitor your air intake temperatures, monitor the boost and see if the ECU is pulling the ignition timing on the engine. And if you monitor all these things and you're seeing that the boost is staying pretty much the same, but your air intake temperatures are skyrocketing, then obviously you need some upgrades on the cooling system for the air intake temperatures, because this car is going to feel slow otherwise. And I see this regularly. If I do a UK track day and somebody goes out and they do 10 laps, and then I ask them how it was when they got back, they go to me, the car felt great for the first 5, and then it felt really sluggish and slow for the rest of them. And that's not the car itself being slow. That's not the tune doing a bad job if the car is tuned. That's the air intake temperatures skyrocketing with the track use, and then the driver thinking it's something catastrophically wrong with the tune, when in reality, the engine is just taking in really hot air. So you guys need to let me know in the comment section, what matters more to you? Would you be chasing boost numbers, or are you more after those air intake temperatures being stable and as cold as possible? Here are a few myths that people actually think are true. One of them is people think more boost equals more power, and yes, that is practically true. But it's absolutely no good having a lot of boost if those air intake temperatures are really, really high. And if you guys do want a fact, more boost with hot air always equals less power. If you guys like tuning your car, like I do on my BMW for example, you've got to do your mods in the correct order. Because if you're running an aggressive tune and you're still on a stock intercooler, let's talk about the Polo GTI for example, then you're doing it all backwards because the car can feel really slow with that tune, and that's because your intake air temperatures are too high. In a recap then, I'm going to give you a few things you guys can take away from this video. Now you need to remember that boost is just pressure. Intake air temperatures are the power. And the cooling of those air intake temperatures determines how long your car will feel fast for. Lower IATs equal less knock risk, more consistency with power, and just general health for the engine. And the next time you're having a conversation with somebody and they're talking about how much boost their car makes, maybe the real question you should ask them is, well, what are your air intake temperatures? Because if it can be a hot summer's day and they're keeping those air intake temps below 15 degrees Celsius, they're doing it right. If this video helped you out in any way, then please consider giving it a like so more people can see it. And if you want to, you can send it to somebody who you think needs to fix their cooling mods on their car. And the final thing is, you have to let me know what you think is better in the comment section. Do you think the B58's charge cooling system is good? Or would you rather a air-to-air intercooler but having a big upgraded stage 3 intercooler like this Polo GTI has? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section, so be sure to let me know and I'll personally answer. Apart from that, if you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe. We're trying to reach 4,000 subscribers before 2026 is here. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching today. Bye for now.